Hello and welcome to the Leathercraft Masterclass tool reviews, and in this review we're taking a look at awls, in particular one awl from 6T Leatherworks in Japan. So before we go through the features and benefits of the 6T awl, I'm going to go through some of the awls. So this is a selection of some of my awls that I use here in the workshop, because this relates to size more than anything. So starting with the largest awls, so I have two awls here from Joseph Dixon. This is a company that's no longer in production, so these are older now, but these are what I use for large leather goods. So anything that requires very tough stitching, even though it's not a long awl blade, if I need a larger haft or a larger handle, I have it here. This one here is for very thick leather goods and also bag handles where I don't want the ferrule to hit any raised elements of the handle. Next we have two awls. This one here is from Crimson Hide, so this is their famous pipe awl, a very ergonomic awl and well made. This has a replaceable blade using a grub screw or a set screw, much like this titanium awl from Rocky Mounted Leather Supply made by Jerome David in France. This also has a set screw so you can remove the blade. Moving on to these two awls here, so slight difference in size on these ones, longer blade on this side. These are general purpose awls from Verger Blanchard, so everyone's probably familiar with these awls. The next two awls I have here are both Chinese made awls. This one's an unbranded awl from AliExpress. It's actually a very good awl, but it's a cheaper awl and it has a very wide blade. So this is for 5 stitches per inch and above. The next one here is by Wouter Leather. So this is an ebony awl by Wouter. Pretty good, very small. It's a bit more for intricate pieces since the blade is only about 2mm wide. Now on to the main character of this video. This is the 6T Leatherworks awl. This is handmade by Noriaki Nakama, all the way in Okinawa Miyako Island in Japan, which is a small island off the coast of Japan, and it is impeccably made. The handle is made on this particular model from ebony wood, but there's no waxes, there's no oils, there's no finishes or sealants. It is highly polished, but it's just through sanding alone. So it's very smooth, but it has a very tactile feel. It grips the fingers very well, and I kind of like that finish, to be honest. The ferrule here is made from brass, and this is the main feature of this awl, by the way, and I'll get to that in a minute. And the blade here is a blade made from high-speed steel, which is one of my favorite steels to use in leatherwork due to its toughness and edge retention benefits, but it is not sharp on the sides. So it's not sharp here because there's no taper to it. It doesn't need to be. For example, this awl here, this is the Blanchard one, that has a taper, so in order for it to keep penetrating as it gets wider, it needs to cut a larger hole. This doesn't. It has a straight taper on the side, and it's only the front which is sharp, and it's very sharp straight from the box, as you would imagine. Now, as I mentioned, the collet here, which makes up the ferrule, which is the interface between the awl haft, the handle part, and the blade. This is the feature that is unique to this. Now, most collet awls, whether they're made by Blanchard or Osborne, they tend to be quite bulky and not particularly ergonomic. They tend to be larger awls, not very good looking awls, though that shouldn't really be too much of a consideration in leatherwork in my opinion. But if an awl looks nice, that's great. But this obviously is stunning, as you can see. Now, a collet awl, if you're not familiar with what that means, it means you have a locking nut here, which I can undo with my finger, and I can take that off. And then I have the blade itself, which I can then remove. So not only can I remove it and replace it with another one, I can actually change the angle of the blade. So if I have a particular way that the awl is comfortable in my hand, I can then match the angle of the blade to the angle set by the pricking iron that I'm using, and then all you have to do is simply do up the locking nut like so. Now of course you don't have to take that off, you can just simply loosen it, change the angle, or take it out and put it back in, and then lock it up nice and snug, and then that blade is nice and firmly set. Much like any collet awl, if you were going to use this on thick leather and you have the habit of twisting your blade as you pull out, this is probably not the awl for you. but I would use a larger blade for that anyway. So if you're having to twist, it means you're using a blade that's too small, so you would simply use a larger blade or whatever blade you want. But for this, in my opinion, this is great for small leather goods, small to medium sized leather goods. So watch straps, wallets, small bags. You can even use it on larger bags if you want to, unless you're using very, very thick needles and thick thread where you need a larger blade. But again, 6T Leatherworks sells spare blades, so you could pop a larger one in there if you wanted to. So this little small but mighty awl is made by Noriaki Nakama in Japan, and he hand makes these awls himself. Now this, as you can imagine, in a large hand gets pretty dwarfed. Now I have regular size hands, I guess, but you can see that it is very small even in my hands. Now why is that? Now one of the benefits of having a small awl is accuracy. And if you can manipulate needles in your fingers, you can definitely manipulate something that's several hundred times larger. Even though this is small for an awl, it is not necessarily too small to use. And the way I use this is slightly manipulated. So if I take a larger awl, as you can see with my finger and thumb on the ferrule there, the back of the awl is at the base of my hand where my little finger is. So that's where the power or the pressure is coming from as I drive the blade through the leather. If I brought it up and put the base at the bottom of my index finger there, I would have no control because my finger and thumb are just too far away from where the blade is. So it would be unusual to use it in this sense. So it needs to be further down in my hand, and that's where I transfer the power from. But it's a little bit different with this awl, because if I put it down there, I would essentially have no awl blade. My fingers are on the awl blade itself, as you can see there. So what I do is I bring it up and I have it here, right on the ball area of this knuckle, underneath the knuckle of my index finger. And that is where it goes from. So when I'm stitching, I have my thumb and index finger against the ferrule, and that is where the power is transferred from to drive it through the leather. So it means that instead of having it down here where I have to lift my arm up to get it in at the right angle, I don't have to lift my arm up as much because the awl, as you can see, is much higher up. So I actually find it a more comfortable long-term stitching experience rather than having to lift your arm up, because most of the time, depending on what I'm stitching, I use the French saddler's clams. Now they're at 45 degree in my lap, and I'll be showing you that in a second. So when I bring the awl blade up to push it in, if it's in the base of my hand, I have to bring my elbow high to do so. Whereas this awl means you don't have to do that. Now you do have to, as you're stitching, bring this down into the base of your hands to stitch, and then use your finger and thumb to bring it back up and stitch, and then it comes back down. It's not really much of a difficult transition, and after about 10 stitches in, you kind of just get used to it. And having something so small and maneuverable is actually quite nice. So let's see how this performs now. We'll get the clams, we'll get some leather, and we'll see if this ebony, brass and high-speed steel awl is up to the task. So here we are with the clams set up, and I have the sample piece of leather in here with some fil chinois thread with some 003 John James needles here. Now what I was explaining earlier is if I had the base of the awl haft down near my pinky finger, I'd have to raise my elbow much higher, which is out of the camera frame at the moment. But with the awl haft base near the knuckle of my index finger here, it is much higher, meaning I just have to lift my wrist slightly and then push in, and I don't actually have to lift my arm up. So it does ease fatigue as you're stitching in that sense. So let's see how it performs with actual stitching. So I'm going to take my awl, place it in, and of course I've set up the blade itself to the irons that I'm using so that the angle is essentially matching. and its small size means it's very maneuverable as I'm stitching. Much more than you would imagine. And as I pull out, you notice that it started here near the top of my hand, and as I pull it out I bring it to the back of my hand and then follow through with my stitch or my needles. So right now it's in the base of my hand, and then as I bring my fingers and thumb together I bring it up at the same time. And it's a very quick adjustment, a very quick maneuver. And it definitely takes away some of the arm fatigue on the longer seams, which is something I like about this awl. And it's smooth, yet it grips in the hand because of course we don't have any finish or sealant or wax. Nice sharp blade making light work of this 3mm vegetable tan leather, so we've only actually pricked the surface of the leather with a pricking iron, so we haven't actually gone all the way through, which is what the awl actually does. It finishes off your holes and acts as a guide for your needles coming into the other side, so you can just index that needle onto your blade. So very quick to use, very comfortable, ergonomic, and even though it's a small size, it really does work well. And again, that straight blade with lack of taper just means it doesn't matter how deep you go with the awl, it's not really opening up the holes any more than they already are. So of course we're not tapping these down, but it just gives you an example of what these stitches actually look like once complete. Nice angles to them. It's essentially working just like any other awl, except that it's smaller, more maneuverable, and I love it for small to medium sized leather goods. Now these stitches will look a little bit better if we tap them down, but it just serves as an example of how to use the awl and how it's a little bit different to most other awls. But the size makes it ideal for small to medium sized leather goods, especially wallets and watch straps and things like that. And of course the ability to switch out the blades or change the angle of the blade very quickly is a definite plus. So if you're looking to improve your hand stitching, check out leathercraftmasterclass.com, where we have the techniques of hand stitching in video form, and also check out our link below where we have the link for 6T Leatherworks and all the awls and tools that they produce. And because these are handmade, you can have various different types of awl blades, and you can have various different sizes of awl as well, so it's not just the smaller awl. So thank you for watching this tool review, and I'll see you in the next video.